Hello guys, welcome to a new video of the first World Chess Championship of 1886. It's Wilhelm Steinitz against Johannes Zukertort, and today we're looking at game number 12. So the game is slowly nearing its end, but it's still pretty equal, 5-4, and in this game we see a beautiful rook sacrifice to win the game. So I can't wait to show you the match. Steinitz has the white pieces and he starts with e4. e5 by Zukertort, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish opening. Now knight to f6, the Berlin defense. Castles by white and knight takes e4. And black is up a pawn, but we can simply win the pawn back after rook to e1. Knight has to go back and knight takes e5. And in this matchup we have seen knight takes e5 a lot, but here Zukertort tries something else. Bishop e7. And now the main move is bringing the bishop back to f1, but Steinitz actually plays bishop takes knight, giving away his bishop pair. Now d takes c6, and black has doubled pawns on the c file, which will be a crucial factor in this game. Now queen to e2, and if you castle here, white has a little tactic with knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, and queen takes e7, being up a pawn. So that's why first, before castling, bishop to e6, now d3, bringing out our bishop. First knight to f5, maybe wanting to come to d4, attacking the queen. Knight to d2, castles, and c3 by Steinitz to prevent the knight coming in. Now rook to e8, and this is actually a pretty funny position after knight to e4. Look at all those pieces being on the e file, except the e3 square, so we just need the bishop on e3 actually. But okay. Now queen to d5. After queen to d5, the bishop develops to f4 to defend our knight. Now the rook comes into the game, so black has developed all his pieces and white only needs his rook into the game. But first Steinitz plays d4 to cement the knight on this beautiful e5 square, and the knight goes back to d6. And here you shouldn't take the knight, since then you actually help black undevelop his doubled pawns. And now we can kick away the knight and black has a fine position. So that's why Steinitz doesn't take the knight here. Here he plays knight to c5, putting some pressure on the b7 pawn. But here, if you play b6, white has a really beautiful move. Knight takes e6. And after pawn takes, you can bring the rook into the game, but first a more forcing move, c4, defended by the queen and the knight. And it looks like a free pawn here, but then we play queen to g4, attacking this pawn. If you try to save it, we have knight takes c6 with a fork. So that's why here you cannot really play b6. So we see the bishop dropping back to c8, defending the pawn. And now the knight maneuvers to d3. But that's not a good move. Now we have f6. The other knight has to move again, but first knight to b4, kicking away the queen, but simply queen to b5. And after queen takes, the knight develops to b5. Now our other knight has to move to d3. And here black has a really beautiful move to keep the advantage. And that's a5. Now the knight has to move back. Bishop to f5. You can see this pressure. Rook has to move. And here we can even play g5, kick away the bishop, or even a4, then a3, and then g5, bishop drops back. And this is a beautiful position, something like c5. You cannot take it with the pawn, then we take your knight. And if you take it with the knight, then we take your other knight. So that would be a crushing position for black. But Zukertort didn't find a5. He played the wrong move order. He played bishop f5 first. But now Steinitz plays on the a file, a4, he does find the move. Knight drops back to d6, a5, so black cannot play a5, knight goes back, and a6. So we played a4, a5, a6. And here you cannot really push through, then we take the pawn. Even if you take it, we still take the pawn. So first bishop takes, knight takes, and now b6. Now the rooks will double on the e file, rook to e3, king comes to f7 defending the bishop, and rook doubles on e1. And here Zukertort makes a crucial error. He plays rook to d7. And remember, I told you about those doubled pawns earlier on. Well, now they become a huge weakness. Since now, Steinitz has knight to b4. You cannot take the knight, then we take your rook, which is unguarded now, only by the king, but we attack it twice. And the knight will come in here, take the pawn, and have more pressure on the bishop. So first Zukertort tries to play g5, but simply bishop g3, f5, but simply f4. Doesn't really work. c5, knight jumps in, pawn takes, and look at this threat. Knight jumping into e5 with a fork. So the king has to move to prevent the fork. And now white plays a really nice move, rook to e5. But rook to e5 does allow knight takes d4. So maybe perhaps better is bishop f2 first. And after pawn takes, now rook to e5 to take this pawn and take the other pawn. But okay, rook to e5 still a very good move. Now knight takes. Knight takes and rook takes. Rook takes f5 check, king moves, and pawn takes g5. And here perhaps the best move is maybe king to g6. Now white will have to move his rook, maybe bring our rook back. And here you can see that the bishop can actually give a discovered check to the king. So maybe king to h1. Now the rook comes on the open file. You cannot take the bishop, since then after rook takes, you're actually mated. So here's something like h4, and white still has a beautiful position. But what Zukertort played here allowed white to play a beautiful tactic. Bishop c5. And the move looks very logical. A discovered attack on the king. But here, Steinitz finds rook takes c5. A beautiful move. Since after rook takes c5, your rook is hanging. So first rook takes with check. Now bishop takes, pawn takes, and at the end of the line we have bishop c3, pinning your rook to the king. King comes to g6. Now bishop takes, pawn takes, and a very important move, h4, defending this pawn. Since if you played another move like b3, we simply take this pawn on g5, and it's actually a draw. So h4 is the crucial move at the end of the line to win this game. And now there's not much black can do. He tries to come up with his king, c5, now b3, a very important move to block c4. King goes back to e5, now our king comes to d3, king to f4, and b4, the last move of the game. Since if you take the pawn, we will take this pawn, and we will hunt this pawn. You cannot take our h4 pawn, simply g3. And even if you take the g3 pawn, we have h5, king to g4, and g6, the winning move. If you take the pawn, we take the pawn back, and the king cannot defend the pawn. Steinitz won the game, and he is now up 6-4 in the match. I hope you liked this video. If so, please like, subscribe, or comment, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.